For decades, the relationship between Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran has been a study in mutual suspicion, proxy confrontation, and steadily rising strategic stakes. When Iran's 1979 revolution toppled the pro-Western Shah and installed Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's theocracy, every pillar of the old regional order shook. Israel, which had quietly relied on Iran for oil and intelligence, suddenly faced a regime that denounced it as a cancerous tumor. From that moment, the two states charted opposing courses that would intersect repeatedly, sometimes through covert sabotage, sometimes on battlefields in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza, and finally, in 2024 to 25, in the most direct clash either side had yet risked. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Israel watched Iran build an axis of allied militias: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Islamic Jihad, and later Hamas in Gaza, and a lattice of Shia paramilitaries in Iraq and Syria. Tehran's goal was deterrence through asymmetry. If Israel struck the Iranian homeland, Iran's partners could hit Israeli or Jewish targets worldwide. Israel, for its part, pursued a twin strategy of striking Iran's out-of-area proxies while waging a covert war against Iran's nuclear and missile engineers. Between 2009 and 2021, a string of mysterious explosions, cyber intrusions, and assassinations slowed, but never fully stopped, the uranium enrichment program that Israeli and Western intelligence judged to be inching toward weapons capability. By 2023, the nuclear clock appeared to tick far faster. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that Iran had stockpiled enough 60% enriched uranium to produce several bombs if it decided to enrich further to weapons grade. Diplomatic negotiations in Vienna had collapsed, and intermittent U.S. sanctions no longer restrained Tehran's centrifuge installations at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly revived a doctrine known in Jerusalem as Begin 2.0, echoing Menachem Begin's 1981 order to bomb Saddam Hussein's Osirak reactor. Never allow a sworn enemy to cross the nuclear threshold. Netanyahu's rhetoric gained a receptive audience in Washington after Donald Trump returned to the White House in January 2025. But Trump initially urged patience, hoping to revive a stricter nuclear deal. When that track failed in the spring, Israel accelerated war planning. Iran's own actions during 2023-24 pushed the confrontation toward open conflict. Intelligence leaks later showed that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, tested a new generation of solid-fuel ballistic missiles with ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers, easily enough to strike every Israeli city. Meanwhile, IRGC Quds Force advisors oversaw rocket upgrades for Hezbollah and helped Hamas build larger underground launch complexes beneath Rafah and Khan Yunis. In October 2024, Iran orchestrated a multi-directional rocket barrage against Israel from Syria and western Iraq. Although Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow interceptors shot down most of the salvos, Israel declared the attack an unacceptable red line. 2 weeks later, on 26 October 2024, the Israeli Air Force, IAF, executed Operation Days of Repentance, crippling 20 Iranian missile and drone facilities and destroying an alleged atomic weaponization lab at Parchin. Tehran's response was uncharacteristically muted, limited to cyber operations and proxy skirmishes, signs that Israel's first wave had caught the regime off balance. Yet in early 2025, Iran doubled down on enrichment and dispersed air defense assets deeper into its interior. Israeli and U.S. intelligence concluded that by November 2025, Iran could reach irreversible breakout. Against that clock, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and IAF Commander Tamer Bar presented Netanyahu with a joint Mossad-IDF plan for a decisive strike. Dismantle Iran's core nuclear, missile, and air defense infrastructure in a single compressed campaign and decapitate the IRGC command chain. Trump's National Security Council reportedly greenlighted limited U.S. logistical support, aerial refueling, and real-time satellite tracking of Iranian air defense radars. At 02:05 a.m., local time on 13 June 2025, the plan went live. Over 200 F-35I Adir and F-15I Ramjets took off from Nevatim, Ramon, and civilian airfields pressed into service. Using Jordanian and Saudi airspace corridors quietly coordinated with Amman and Riyadh, the strike packages entered Iran from multiple vectors. Bunker-busting GBU-72 munitions and Rampage standoff missiles slammed into Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan enrichment halls, collapsing centrifuge cascades. Simultaneously, Iranian S-300 and Bavar 373 SAM sites north of Tehran went dark under a rain of Harpy loitering drones. According to Israeli briefings released after the ceasefire, 80% of Iran's long-range surface-to-air inventory was neutralized in the first 6 hours. Iranian command centers in Tehran, Shiraz, and Kermanshah were next. A Mossad-guided commando team in western Tehran lit up the IRGC Air and Space Force HQ with laser markers minutes before precision-guided bombs flattened it, killing IRGC Chief Hossein Salami, Armed Forces Chief Mohammad Bagheri, and Missile Force Commander Amir Ali Hajizadeh. In all, Israel claimed to have eliminated 15 senior Iranian nuclear scientists and several hundred IRGC and Basij officers. Iran's early retaliation consisted of roughly 100 Shahed and Ababil-class drones, all downed by Israeli air defense layers before reaching populated zones. But within 24 hours, Tehran launched a massive salvo of over 150 ballistic and cruise missiles toward Haifa, Ashdod, and the Negev bases, while daringly striking Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, where U.S. CENTCOM assets reside. Arrow 3 and David's sling batteries intercepted most projectiles. A handful broke through, causing limited casualties in Tel Aviv's outskirts and Beersheba. Israel followed up with nightly raids from 14 to 24 June, destroying underground missile depots in Kermanshah and Tabriz, radar nodes in Hamadan and Piranshah, and drone assembly plants in Isfahan. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War estimated that 65% of Iran's counted missile launchers and roughly 1,000 ready missiles were obliterated. Residual stocks dropped below half their pre-war total. Crucially, no Israeli manned aircraft were lost, an outcome attributed to relentless electronic warfare and prior destruction of Iran's integrated air defense networks. By 24 June, both sides faced strategic exhaustion. Iran's retaliatory capacity had been blunted. Israel's reserve mobilization strained its economy and raised fears of Hezbollah opening a northern front. Mediation by the United States, Oman, and Switzerland produced a ceasefire framework. Iran would halt enrichment above 20% and grant IAEA expanded inspections. Israel would cease further strikes and allow humanitarian shipments into Iran's damaged regions. The agreement, while fragile, ended 12 days of direct hostilities. Assessing winners and losers depends on the yardstick. Militarily, Israel achieved its immediate aims. It delayed or destroyed Iran's weapon-grade enrichment, decimated missile forces, and proved its reach. Air defense success with interception rates of 80–90% against missile barrages and near-total shoot-down of drones reinforced Israeli deterrence. On the diplomatic front, Jerusalem strengthened quiet ties with Gulf states that facilitated overflight corridors, and Western capitals expressed qualified support, despite humanitarian concerns. For Iran, the costs were staggering. Beyond thousands of military casualties and infrastructure loss, the regime's prestige took a blow. Domestic protests in Tehran, Mashhad, and Esfahan demanded accountability for intelligence failures, echoing the 2022-23 unrest. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's inner circle reportedly began succession maneuvers amid health rumors. Yet the regime survived, rallied nationalist sentiment, and portrayed the ceasefire as a victory of resilience. Regionally, the war reshaped power balances. Hezbollah refrained from a full-scale front, but tested Israel with limited rocket fire, keeping its arsenal largely intact for future bargaining. Gulf monarchies saw Iran's conventional capabilities crippled, reducing immediate threats to shipping lanes. The United States leveraged the outcome to revive broader Abraham Accords expansion talks, as Mike Pompeo argued in a July 2025 op-ed, praising the U.S.-Israeli victory over Iran. Strategically, however, Israel now faces the long-term challenge of ensuring Iran cannot rebuild. Intelligence indicates clandestine centrifuge components survived underground in central Iran. Tehran will likely redouble asymmetric tactics via proxies from Gaza to the Red Sea to compensate for lost deterrence. The war also galvanized anti-Israeli sentiment among Shia populations across the Middle East, complicating future diplomacy. Humanitarian fallout is significant. UN estimates suggest civilian deaths in Iran exceeded 1,500, with infrastructure damage displacing tens of thousands. Israel suffered dozens of civilian fatalities and economic disruptions estimated at $8 billion from reserve call-ups and tourism collapse. Reconstruction aid to Iran is hampered by U.S. sanctions. Gulf donors pledge limited relief conditioned on oversight, while European states debate humanitarian corridors. Legally, Israel defended the strikes under Article 51 of the UN Charter, anticipatory self-defense, arguing Iran was weeks from nuclear breakout and had engaged in prior aggression. Critics counter that Israel bypassed Security Council authorization and risked regional conflagration. The debate foreshadows future norms about preemptive force against emerging nuclear threats. What lessons emerge? First, air supremacy and precision intelligence can dismantle even hardened nuclear infrastructures, at least temporarily. Second, missile defense depth matters. Israel's multi-tiered shield prevented mass casualties and preserved political freedom of action. Third, wars do not end with ceasefire signatures. The day after requires sustained diplomacy, economic stabilization, and regional security frameworks lest old patterns reignite. For conservationists of strategy, the 2025 Israel-Iran war will be dissected for decades. A case study in proactive counterproliferation, the limits of missile offense, and the intersection of technology and geopolitics. For Israelis and Iranians alike, it remains a somber reminder that in the contest between deterrence and escalation, a single miscalculation can drag nations to the brink. Although the guns are silent for now, the ultimate outcome hinges on whether both parties translate battlefield lessons into durable political agreements. If Iran pivots toward a verifiable civilian nuclear path under strict inspection, and Israel complements deterrence with diplomatic outreach, including eventual reintegration of Iran into regional economic networks, then June 2025 may mark a turning point away from perpetual brinkmanship. If, however, each side rearms and resumes covert chess, the next round could escalate even higher. The tiger of conflict has been wounded, not killed. It prowls in the shadows of ideology, ambition, and unresolved security dilemmas. The coming years will show whether statesmanship can cage it, or whether another roar will echo across the desert skies.